of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
And live from New York City, it is Surviving the Survivor, the show that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And we've got an amazing panel tonight to discuss a historic day as far as trials go. We've got the hip-hop star and mogul known as Diddy. Used to be P. Diddy, used to be Puff Daddy. Nancy Grace calls him Cuff Daddy. Pick your choice of whatever name you would like. But no matter what it doesn't change the fact that Sean Combs is downtown at the federal courthouse on trial essentially for his life here. Because if he's convicted of these crimes, as Randy and Julia will let you know, he's going to be spending the better part of his life, the rest of his natural life, if not all of it, behind bars. So the stakes are high, and we're going to break it all down. I am coming to you from an undisclosed location in Lower Manhattan. I'm in Randy Zellen's neighborhood. I love New York. New York's my home. But man, I've been here 24 hours, and I feel like I need an oxygen tank hooked up to my side. It's a high pace, high stress city. With that said, let's introduce Randy Zellen. He is a criminal defense attorney. He's a former prosecutor who then turned into a criminal defense attorney. He's tried cases against both the DOJ and the SEC. He's also an adjunct professor at Cornell. He appears on Fox News, Fox Business, CNN Headline, the list goes on. Most importantly, however, he appears on this very show, Surviving the Survivor. So there you go. And next up, we've got a special guest, first time around, Dr. Lisa Aronson Fontes. And we welcome her. We always surprise our guests. She did not know that this was a live video. Here we are. You look great. So thank you, Lisa, for being here and being a sport about it. Lisa serves as an expert witness in legal cases related to intimate partner abuse, coercive control, trauma, child abuse, cultural issues. The list goes on. She's got her PhD in psychology from an excellent university, the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And last but certainly not least, she is an intrepid reporter. She works for Court TV, but she also anchors there. One day she will be the new Vinnie Politan. I have no doubt. Julia, she's shaking her head no, saying, please, no. But here she is, Julia Janae. Randy Zellen, I'm going to start with you, and I apologize every time. By the way, that is not a green screen behind me. That's my friend who happens to have a screen in front of a very cool window. So shout out to Sean for hosting me in Lower Manhattan. We're going to get into everything. Today, obviously a big day, Randy. They seated a jury of 18, 12 who will be doing, normal jury deliberations at the end, 6 alternates. And basically, the judge said to them, look, we're good to go. Sit on down. This trial is going to go to maybe July 4th, which is a long ways away, about 8 weeks. But there was an objection. So they were supposed to seat the jury on Friday. One juror got cold feet, and the judge, this guy, Arun Subramanian, seems to be a very good judge in the federal courthouse. He said, let's give it till the weekend. So today, the attorneys had their strikes. And after the government issued their strikes, jury strikes, the defense got up and said, hey, wait a minute. These are all African Americans that you just struck. This seems to be a pattern, is what they told the judge. Then Jim Comey's daughter, Maureen, I believe her first name is, who is working for the government. She's kind of the lead prosecutor on this case. She got up and said, look, I'm going to put this on the record. This has absolutely nothing to do with racism, and basically went through step by step, one by one, why they eliminated the jurors who they eliminated. One called a cop an a-hole, using that word. Another has been under arrest. Another said they knew 17 members of Sean Diddy Combs' family and couldn't necessarily be impartial. So Is this just early jousting, Randy, here between the defense and the government?
It's early jousting. It's creating and preserving an appellate record. What the defense always tries to do, and this is what we do as defense attorneys. When you're representing someone of color, the moment you get the sense, even if it is indiscriminate, that the government is challenging, because let's take a step back. There are two avenues to get rid of a juror. You can get rid of a juror for what's called cause, and you have an unlimited number of challenges for cause. All you need to do is demonstrate that this potential juror cannot be fair and impartial. In addition, the defense and the government each get a certain number of what we call peremptory challenges, which is I can challenge you for any reason that I like, and I don't have to give a reason for it, except when the other side says, hey, wait a second, you're doing it because you were discriminating, and here, because you were discriminating against people of color. We have a defendant who's a person of color, and the government is purposely getting rid of potential jurors who are jurors of color. At that point, the government has to say, wait a second, Judge, no, we can articulate a non-discriminatory reason why we are challenging these jurors. To add to your example, I believe one of the jurors went to high school or the same high school as P. Diddy. And the government argued something that we call unconscious bias, meaning we went to the same school together, so maybe somehow I will feel a sense of empathy or sympathy for the defendant. So here the government said, no, Judge, we're not excluding people based upon race. It's what we call a Batson challenge based upon a case where the defendant was Batson. So the government did that, and we have a seated jury.
There you go. How do you pronounce? Is it Baxton or Baxton? I was trying to figure that out all morning.
B-A-T like Tom, S like Sam, O-N like Nancy.
All right, that drives me crazy. Now I know. Now I will never forget. But yeah, it was an issue related to Batson, and the judge wanted to hear it, and the government laid out why they wanted to get rid of these particular jurors, and they did. And now the jurors are in fact seated. So, Dr. Fontes, I promise I'm coming to you in a minute. We've got the two attorneys on. So, Julia, to you. Madison Smizer is the prosecutor for the government who basically led opening statements. Before I get there, let me kind of just set the scene. First of all, as one would expect in Lower Manhattan, it was absolute chaos. We had people waiting in line beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern yesterday, and the line wrapped around the building. I was able to get in. They ended up only reserving 9 spots for regular human beings in the courtroom. And so most of us were directed to an overflow room. And by the end of the day, they had 4 different overflow rooms with video playing. And it's actually a better seat. It might sound like sour grapes, but it really is, because you have a front view of the defendant, Sean Diddy Combs. And something Randy's very familiar with, and Julie, I'm sure you're well aware of, in the federal court system, there were these 3 massive counsel tables. So the whole front row were the federal prosecutors, and they're all women, and they're all white women. And it really stood out. Mark Garagos had kind of brought that up in the media late last week, saying, is this a diverse enough mix to be prosecuting a case like this? And I couldn't help but notice it was a very kind of obvious observation to make, if that makes sense. So then the second and third rows were all Sean Diddy Combs attorneys. So he had like 10 different defense attorneys there. Plus he had, law clerks and people helping those attorneys sitting in the front row of the gallery. And then in the second row of the gallery, you had Sean Combs' mother and his siblings, his children and their siblings and other family and friends. So that was kind of the layout. And then the jurors are, if the judge's bench is facing this way, the jurors are just to the left of the judge. This is some of the action from outside the courthouse, some shots and some sketches, obviously. And you see here, this happened a lot. By the way, Sean Diddy Combs was wearing this kind of oatmeal color. We couldn't figure it out. Very noticeable with the gray hair now and the gray goatee. But you can see behind these two people, that's where the family is. And he was turning around and talking to them quite a bit. And I noticed at the beginning, he was either going through a legal document, but to me, it looked like a Bible that he was studying or reading intently. And then once, everything got underway, he was focused and paying attention. So, Julia, I know that was a huge intro. Just wanted to add my 2 cents there. The government gets up and basically starts by saying, this is Sean Combs. He's an iconic figure. He's a cultural figure, but he has a whole other side, and they start to get into it. They talk about the bodyguards that worked with him. He had an inner circle, a chief of staff, and this is where they're starting to build up this central theory of this criminal enterprise. And as I was watching this play out, Julia, I was wondering, is there enough there for this kind of criminal enterprise? This is a very difficult case, I think, to prosecute. And if anyone's got the team of attorneys, it would be Sean Diddy Combs. He's got this guy, Mark Agnafilo, who I'm sure Randy's familiar with, a very good attorney. Your thoughts on starting it with this whole notion of this criminal enterprise?
Oh, I think it's an uphill battle for the federal prosecution because of the surprisingly small amount of alleged victims that they have. And I think that's been something that's really surprised people today, because we really didn't know who we were going to hear about. And these opening statements lay out who's going to be taking the stand, who's going to be the accusers in this case. Just in terms of what I'm familiar with federal court houses there in New York, that I've sat through the entirety of the R. Kelly trial that was there in, I believe, the Eastern District. Ghislaine Maxwell, though, there in the Southern District, was inside for part of her trial as well, or her plea. But people expected a lot more. They expected that there were going to be as many Jane Does as we saw in the R. Kelly trial. We saw dozens of names in the indictment. I mean, it was Jane Doe 1 through almost 20 when it came to people that the government had that they planned to bring in. They didn't even bring in all of the Jane Does and John Does, but they had them ready. They were in the indictment, and we still saw at least 10 take the stand and be part of what those jurors would be deciding on. So for us to hear about 5 alleged victims in this case through the different indictments, and there are these multiple superseding indictments in Sean Diddy Combs' case, to then during jury selection hear that there were going to be 3 alleged victims that could be taking the stand. And there was a question about victim number 3. And the government said they couldn't tell the defense whether or not she was actually going to be testifying because they hadn't reached her. They were trying to reach out to her attorney. There were it seemed like just misses in terms of communication. So we're waiting on pins and needles today to see who is going to actually be taking the stand in this case. Is this case more so about Cassie? And what do we hear at the beginning of opening statements? What do we read for those of us not in the courtroom like Joel was? But we see that it's Cassie and a Jane Doe, essentially. So 2 people who they are going forward with this jury. Now, people ask me, does that mean that there are only going to be 2 witnesses testifying? Absolutely not. There's 8 weeks worth of trial that's ahead here. But all of those other witnesses, ideally, according to what we saw in the opening statements, they are going to be corroborating this scheme, this coercion, this sex trafficking lifestyle, but they aren't the accusers. And I think that raises questions about whether or not the prosecution is going to be able to be successful. But something they have that's so strong is that video of Cassie. I think it's going to be hard for jurors to separate a man who is this abusive and this powerful, who can spend $100,000 to suppress a video and not believe that he did a lot more, even if the government can't show them more accusers than the 2 that they say they are going to be bringing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And I'm going to get back to this issue of the witnesses, because that came up today. I mean, people, there was witness testimony today, but as it pertains to the victims, the government was really talking, like you said, just about Cassie and to Jane Doe. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but Dr. Fontes, welcome to Surviving the Survivor. Love having new best guests. Appreciate you being here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So just tell everybody what is really your expertise, and I guess your initial thoughts, kind of your bird's eye view of this particular case and this particular defendant.
So I wrote the second book ever on coercive control, and coercion certainly forms a big part of this case. I also have expertise in sexual violence, domestic violence, child abuse, and related matters to that. Why victims behave in the ways they do, what the effects are of sexual violence on people. And I testify as an expert on a lot of cases related to this, not as high profile generally.
Yeah. And for those who are not that familiar, I mean, how do you define coercive control?
Coercive control is an idea developed by Evan Stark, and it is a strategy of totally dominating another person, usually an intimate partner. It can include isolation, sexual abuse, intimidation, including threats, financial abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, which might include strangulation, it might include drugging, all the other things you can think of as being part of physical abuse, monitoring, micromanaging somebody's everyday life, control through the children if there are children, and then if a couple separates, post-separation abuse after the separation. So not all of these things have to be present, but more than one is present. And the harm, of course, of control is partly that it happens over time. So it's a behavioral pattern that repeats itself over time.
Yeah. And I think the government is trying to make the case to show the jurors that this was a repetitive sort of abuse, at least that Cassie Ventura was facing at the hands of Sean Diddy Combs. And we'll get into that a little bit more as well. I got to tell you, so by the end of the day, again, there were 4, I believe, overflow rooms. So there's an unbelievable, insatiable appetite for this particular case. And the testimony today started to get incredibly graphic right out of the gates. And I would say that in my overflow room, and just in general, it was a larger female group than it was male. And you heard sort of a lot of audible gasps. And of course, I'm just sitting there thinking, is this what the jurors are thinking? But before we get quite to that point, Randy, back to Julia's point about this witness. Today in court, they were really focused on Cassie Ventura and also this Jane Doe, who obviously Cassie has decided to, unmask herself, so to speak, and she's using her name. Jane Doe, this other witness, is going to remain anonymous. Obviously, the judge and the attorneys know who she is, but we will not know who she is, and the jurors will not know. But is this, just to Julia's point, I was expecting sort of victim after victim, especially with what we saw with Tony Busby and all these civil lawsuits and men also accusing Diddy of the same sort of thing. I was just sitting in court today saying to myself, I don't know if this is going to be enough the way it is, but I would assume that the federal government knows a lot more about lawyering than I do. And Randy used to be one of those prosecutors. So what do you say?
It's not really a matter of lawyering. It is a matter of understanding what the basic premises behind a great trial lawyer. And as Judge Mark Bennett has taught all of us who try cases, the essence of a great trial lawyer is a great storyteller. In this case, it is going to boil down to whose story makes more sense, whose story is more compelling, whose story is more credible. So to your point, and to Julia's point, and to the doctor's point, I'm sure, which will be coming up, you look at quantity versus quality. And yes, people may be surprised at the lack of quantity. But the flip side of that argument is, does quantity after a while belie insecurity? How many people do you need to have come in to testify to, as to the doctor would say, the abuse and the indicia of abuse, the control, the physical control, the emotional control, the financial control? Remember, what you may not have in quantity of witnesses, as I understand it, you're going to have in quality of video. People lie. People make mistakes. People shade. We're all colored by our experiences, and our memories can be altered or affected by our experiences and being in the moment. Videos don't. Videos take us back to the moment. Videos don't lie unless they've been doctored or they have been altered. So playing it down the middle, I would be less concerned about the quantity of victims and be more concerned about the quality of their testimony. And I would be equally concerned about the quality of the video evidence. And that actually may be more compelling than parading witness after witness in who can be cross-examined. And believe me, everybody who testifies can be beaten up. We even saw the police officer get beaten up over, oh, you say now that she had a black eye? Well, you didn't put it in your report. Mm-hmm. So the more testimony there is, the more there is the ability to cross-examine and impeach. Whereas with a video, and I've sat there through awfully graphic videos in federal court, you look for a place to run and hide because there's nothing that you can do about it. So I think here, this case really boils down, in my humble opinion, to more about quality and less about quantity.
And that's a great point. And I think we're going to get that for sure. There's a reason they say this trial is going to take 8 weeks. There's a tremendous amount of evidence that they've been pouring through, and they have. And that does include video and text messages and all sorts of other things that we are already starting to see come into evidence. And Julia, I'm one of these people. The COE will tell you, if I get like a new pair of shoes or something, I'll keep it in my box in my closet for like 4 months before I like to savor the COE. She's ripping open the box, wearing the shoes the same day. My point here is day one, we're seeing the video, the Cassie Ventura video. This is now the infamous video from the Intercontinental Hotel, 2016, right there. And this is in the lobby, and you can see we're not showing the video, but they played it over and over today, and they're going to keep playing it. And this is a point toward the latter half of the video where, after he grabs this woman by her hair, Cassie Ventura, he then kicks her for good measure. And you could hear, Julia, again, the audible gasps, especially at this point right here. Like, I was paying very close attention. And he comes out and he grabs her. And I think we've all seen the video. And people you hear reaction, but the real reaction comes kind of at the end, where he gives her this final kick while she's already down. I mean, if you're the government, you're prosecuting this case, are you pulling this incredibly important piece of evidence out on day one, showing the jurors this right now? And how do you know how often to show them this as this trial goes on?
I would imagine they're going to show this as often as they can get away with. And especially with, I understand it's expected that Cassie's going to be on the stand for the rest of the week at least. And her attorney outside says that she's ready. He was there. Douglas Wigdor was at the courthouse today. She may have been there because initially last week they thought that she would be starting today and that these two witnesses would have been short.
We saw someone who we thought was her. Now, in retrospect, I'm not sure, because she's fairly pregnant right now, like very far along. And I honestly didn't catch good enough look. But to your point, when I left tonight, I left the courthouse at 5:00, and the line was already about 30 people deep waiting for the next day. So people are really anticipating Cassie's appearance. But did not mean to cut you off. Go ahead
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Joel.
Yeah, no problem. That it's just a video that's stomach turning. Every time you see it, it's something that you almost don't get desensitized to because it is just that bad. So if these jurors are seeing it played over and over again through this trial, it's going to be something that sticks with them. I just can't imagine what it's going to be like when Cassie is on the stand and she's reacting to the video. That's the thing we haven't seen. She did file her lawsuit. It was very graphic. It contained a trigger warning before all of this happened. Then that case settled. Then the video came out. But we didn't see any press conferences from Cassie. We didn't see her reaction to the public seeing this horrific time in her life clearly. So this will be the first time that we will be hearing it through her eyes and these jurors seeing her react to what we've all seen over and over again. And we know from jury selection, there's a good handful of these jurors who have already seen the video. Some of them have only seen still frames. Some say they only saw 5 seconds of it, but some that saw it to the point that it caused them to form an opinion were struck for cause. But most of them have seen it, but they'll be seeing it in a different way once she takes the stand. So I think if you're the prosecution, you're figuring out every way to bring it in. And I don't know, Joel, you may have heard something more during those opening statements about what these videos will show, but I saw that one of your viewers mentioned, is there another abuse video in addition to Cassie? My understanding from the filings is that these other videos are of the freak-offs and that they include different people who were hired, people who were engaging in this sex that the prosecution says is coerced. But I'm wondering if any of it is going to look like abuse as clearly as it's unrefutable when you look at the Cassie video that this is abuse. But is the defense going to be able to explain away the others as this was kinky sex, this was BDSM, this was something that was consensual, even if it is alternative and outside the bounds of perhaps what many of the jurors would think is normal?
Yeah. And there was, by the way, to your point, there was a witness on the stand who kind of served as a male escort for Diddy, and he provided some testimony. It got really graphic. There was some weird cross going on at the end that I'm going to ask both the lawyers about. But to your point, the video with Cassie is very disturbing, and they made it very clear in court, the government and the defense, that you're going to see disturbing video. So they're going to show the jurors these freak-offs and what went on there. And then I guess the big question is going to be, the defense is going to say, well, this is a lifestyle choice. We already heard that today, versus coercive control. So that's a good transition into Dr. Fontes. So to you, can I
talk about something for a second that's come up?
Yeah. Please.
So I think we really have to think about what language we're going to use, right? Mm-hmm. So these sexual events at which some people say they were coerced, they were drugged to participate, other people were paid to participate. Are we going to use Mr. Combs' language? Are we going to call them freak-offs? I mean, there's a certain logic to that, right? But it would also be a logic to calling them something else. I don't know, group sex, rape, group rape. I think that I don't know really what happened there. Of course, I don't know any more than your listeners know. But there is some evidence, or some people are saying that they were coerced, they were drugged to participate. And so that sounds like not something simply freaky and kinky, but it sounds like something very problematic and possibly illegal. And some of the other terms like lifestyle or escort. I mean, the guy who testified today, from what I understand, he is it Mr. Daniel?
Mr. Daniel. Yeah, Mr. Daniel.
Yeah, Mr. Daniel.
Philip Daniel, I believe.
Yeah. So he talked about having being paid hundreds and thousands of dollars to have sex with Ms. Ventura repeatedly while he heard Mr. Combs slapping her and hurting her, yelling at her in the next room, yelling at her when he said, "Come here," and she said, "Give me a second," and then He dragged her into the next room. Apparently, he says he heard a blow. And then he said something like, "You come when I tell you to come." So I think we just have to be a little bit careful as we use the language. I really appreciated what Julia said about sex trafficking lifestyle. I mean, think about those two words together, right? Sex trafficking, an awful crime in which people lose their autonomy, they lose their independence, they lose their ability to make choices in their life, and that is paired with lifestyle. That's such an interesting, juxtaposition, or such an interesting pairing there.
Yeah,
I watched that video I saw that video of Cassie, and it is highly disturbing. And
what do you I mean, what do you
getting desensitized?
Yeah, I'm sorry. What do you? So you're the doctor here. What when you watch that video, what do you call that? I mean, that's obviously not a freak off. It's not from a freak off, but how do you describe that video? What is that video?
A brutal beating. It looks like someone who does not see the humanity of the other person and feels no need to hold himself back whatsoever in terms of his brutality. It's very clear this is not a fight. A fight implies that it's something mutual. This isn't an argument. This is a beat down of another individual. And it's painful to watch. I mean, in this case, it seems like there's quite a bit of evidence, at least of that. And if there is video footage available of these sex events, then, as Randy said, that's going to be very vivid footage for the jury. I don't know who else had the footage besides Mr. Combs. Joel, is that something you know? Like, how are they going to? Who does the prosecution have the videos, and how'd they get them?
The government, because they seized a lot of his stuff when they raided both his homes, so they've got the freak off videos, portions of them, and the government made it very clear that they're going to be played today. If I remember correctly, the defense, Randy, and I'd love for you to weigh in on this. The defense, Randy, and then we'll get the doctor back on this too. They kind of chose an interesting route, depending on how you say it, for how I guess kind of a circuitous way of phrasing things, because what they said essentially, Randy, in so many words, and thank you to Ollie and thank you to Josephine Santamoro, who was recovering from a series of strokes. By the way, the witness there were two witnesses today. One was a security guy from the hotel where Cassie was beaten in that video. And he was kind of challenging, going back and forth and jousting with the defense. And then the second witness was this guy, Daniel Phillip, 41 years old, who basically, for all intents and purposes, was a male escort. But Randy, basically, Tenny Garagos, and this is her right here. This is Mark Garagos's daughter. She's working for the defense. And basically she said, Randy, in so many words, and this really kind of took me by surprise. She said, what you're going to see and what you're going to hear is domestic violence, is DV, but it's not racketeering. They're not RICO charges. And to me, as a guy with two daughters and a wife, domestic violence is bad as is. I don't know if the charges actually leak into that area because there's so many charges against him. But what is this notion here that are they just trying to avoid these RICO charges? And how does that intersect with all that's going on?
It's more than that. It is the reality of video testimony, because the video speaks. The video is evidence, and witness testimony, where it is going to be incredible for the defense to deny that the violence didn't take place. So all you can do from a defense standpoint is concede the violence, but not concede the federal crime. We are not in a state court. Mr. Combs is not charged with assault under the New York State penal law. He is not charged with assault-related crimes under the New York State penal law. He is charged with federal crimes, which carry with them different elements and different burdens of proof. So it is perfectly appropriate for the defense to concede. And there's an old saying in my business when I was a prosecutor: you concede what you dare not deny, and you deny what you dare not concede. So here, all the defense can do is say, yes, there was violence, but he's not charged in this case with that kind of violence. And if all you find is that kind of violence, you have to acquit my client.
Someone was at, thank you, Randy. Someone was just asking about Sean Combs' demeanor. And at the very onset, I could tell he was kind of nervously, there you go. He was nervously drinking water. And then the judge was seated, and the judge asked him and said, hey, do you need more water? And he said, thank you so much, Judge. It was almost like a nervous need to keep himself occupied, but he was given another pitcher of water and he seemed to be chugging it down. But once everyone was in that gallery, he seemed somewhat comfortable. And it's you've got to remember, this guy is a performer, one of the better performers of our generation. And he's in there in court and he knows everyone's watching him. And I was watching him when the government was giving their opening and basically talking about all of this sordid, all these sordid details. I was watching Diddy, and Diddy was just kind of taking it in, like, yeah, like I'm a celebrity. That's what celebrities do. So, Dr. Fontes, my question to you: are these issues any more prevalent with celebrity-like figures who kind of get engrossed in their own celebrity? They don't know their own boundaries, maybe. I hope I'm not generalizing, because I'm sure there are plenty of great celebrities, but I was going to pick on one person named George Clooney. I won't, because I saw a video of him the other day and I was actually surprised by what I saw, which I could explain at another point. But and Julia's always like, why are you saying it if you said you're not going to say it? Because I always do that. But Clooney would not shake this woman's hand. He just looked like, to me, he looked like he's been a celebrity too long. And he's, you get in that insular bubble. So Dr. Fontes, is someone like Sean Diddy Combs, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say predisposed, because that's not it, but living this celebrity lifestyle for so many years, do you think the lines are blurred for him? And he's like, no, it's okay for me to have male escorts, sleep with my girlfriend, and it's okay for me to beat her because I'm the king.
So I think you're touching on something really important, which is the level of drive and narcissism that a person may have to reach this height. I'm not saying that all performers do by any means, or even all successful performers, but that is a characteristic which can lead somebody to be comfortable having the spotlight on them at all times. I have seen horrendous behavior from individuals who don't have a penny to their name, but they're not going to be paying thousands of dollars to a man to have sex with their girlfriend. They're going to be giving them maybe a little bit of cocaine or something to do it. They're not going to be having a freak off in a mansion. They're going to be having those sexual assaults or alleged sexual assaults in the back room in their house. So I think that the impulse to be cruel and to make people obey one's desires sexually, I think that can be found at every social class. But the degree to which it appears that Mr. Combs was able to pull off this very organized form of sexual activity, alleged sexual assault, you can't, that's not your neighbor, or not my neighbor, who's going to be able to do that. And then, of course, it's hard for people to call the police, to talk to authorities. Many people said they were terrified of him. Daniel, why do I keep forgetting? Phillips. He apparently said that he thought that Mr. Combs was all powerful, and that's why he didn't go to authorities. He thought he was all powerful. Well, if that's what he thought, imagine what Cassie thought, who had been beaten. Potentially, I mean, that could have been, I don't know how bad it was, but it could have been very, very bad. Apparently, according to Mr. Phillips, Mr. Combs hung somebody off a balcony, threatened them with death. So so there are a lot of people who knew what was going on, people who were in the room and people who helped organize it and made it happen. People in the hotel, people who provided refreshments, maybe people who provided the cases of lube that they apparently had. And a lot of people knew, and they were afraid of him. He was all powerful, or some made money off him. So.
Yeah. And to your point, Dr. Fontes, Daniel Phillip, 41 years old, he's the guy that testified. And he said some things that immediately the defense objected to, but they were said very innocently. And the bottom line was that he was literally scared to death of Sean Diddy Combs. And that because they asked him, well, why didn't you go and get help for Cassie Ventura? I don't want to get too graphic, but this is the nature of this trial. So he's giving testimony and he's talking about sexually satisfying Cassie Ventura. And at one point he could no longer do it. I guess literally and figuratively. And they asked why. And he said, because he witnessed Cassie getting beaten up. He witnessed this. He heard the slapping, like you said, and he felt so bad for her. Julia, not to drag you into this, but I guess the point here, when that came up, it was a very honest, very sincere moment. He even went on and said something, and he got cut off by the defense and the judge. But he said something like, "I was even afraid that Sean Diddy Combs has people in the New York Police Department." And incidentally, when this guy was like on the inside, and when this guy was told originally to go to this hotel to meet Cassie Ventura, he was told by Diddy's people to wear a police uniform, and he couldn't find one, so he just bought an NYPD shirt. But the point here is that there was this incredible fear, not just by Cassie Ventura, but by this guy, Daniel Phillip, who by all accounts seemed to really care about her ultimately and wanted to get her help, but couldn't. I'm kind of getting goosebumps talking about it because it was a really honest moment in court. Is that the kind of thing that is going to draw on jurors?
Oh, absolutely. Just hearing you talk about it. I mean, that fear is, I think, what puts this in federal court. Randy talked about storytelling, and inside of that courtroom, I think the storytelling is no one could bring Sean Diddy Combs down except for the federal government. He had to come in and be the federal government rather had to come in and be the savior for this villain who no one could control. He had so much money, he had so much power that the state level, even with charges, couldn't get to him. And just to walk it back with why we're even in a RICO trial and not a sexual assault trial. We see a lot of these RICO cases against celebrities who are powerful, who have skirted around, perhaps, or alleged to have skirted around other allegations against them, other charges, people going to local police and the state prosecutors saying they just don't have enough evidence. But RICO allows these prosecutors to bring in different overt acts, things that have happened over the years, even if the statute of limitations has run out, even if they don't have proof beyond a reasonable doubt of each individual incident, they can bring it all together to say this man was running a criminal enterprise that allowed him to carry out all of these crimes. And so RICO, for those who scrutinize it, say it's a pretty powerful tool that prosecutors can use when they don't really have enough evidence individually. But in a situation where you have someone who is so powerful, and I think that's what the prosecution is going to hammer home with these witnesses, that no one knew what to do, that it takes a case like this to finally get justice for someone like Cassie. And I keep comparing it to the R. Kelly trial because the indictments almost read the same when it comes to what statutes this was filed under, the sex trafficking element. There's not the underage girl element that there was in the R. Kelly trial, but the control that was used, I mean, it's stuff that I can't get out of my head from sitting through that trial, that he would do to them and film, talking about R. Kelly, to keep them from going to police, stuff that was so embarrassing to them. And he threatened to reveal it to their families, reveal it to the world, but he had been the one who made them do those things. So I think just harping on that fear can get the prosecution to where they want to go. And no doubt these jurors are going to understand just what they're dealing with in terms of what was happening.
Yeah, there's so much I want to dig into, and we're going to kind of chip away at it here. Someone asked me earlier about Gloria Allred. I had the pleasant surprise of her being my benchmate in the gallery in the overflow room. So it was myself, Gloria, and her daughter, Lisa Bloom, who's also very well known. I'm sure Randy knows. And she's representing some of the victims on the civil side. And I got some sound of her, which I don't think we have yet. But I also spoke to a person who's known Sean Combs for about the last 40 years, walking around with a free Diddy shirt. I'm going to play that sound for you in a minute. And then let's break down these openings a little bit more. I have some pointed questions for all three guests, but this is a guy named Charlucci Finney, who is a friend of Sean Diddy Combs for at least the last 40 years. And I believe he's a godfather to some of his children, at least one of them. Let's take a listen.
This is the phrase of this. So it was a lot of information.
Was it even surprising to you?
Yes and no. You know what I'm saying? But it was just a lot of information. That's all I can say.
How was it for the family to have to hear that type of graphic detail about their father's sex lives and the mom being there?
I mean, of course it's a little embarrassing to hear that. You know what I'm saying? Nobody want to hear that about their parents, but again, it is what it is.
How do you feel about tomorrow with Cassie testifying?
God, brother.
And how did you feel about tomorrow with Cassie testifying? That's what she asked.
Oh, would you say what?
How do you feel about tomorrow with Cassie testifying?
Oh, I just want everybody, like everybody, was waiting to hear it. Just waiting to hear what she got to say.
When you saw the video again in full in court of the hotel beating, can you talk about what that was, if that was damning for him? And
I'd rather not say. Like I said, we're gonna leave everything up to the jury.
Okay.
He'd rather not talk about the video, which is going to be the case for, I guess, most Diddy supporters, because that's going to be the easiest way out. Thank you to Gwig, by the way, a new name. Thank you for that super chat. I'm calling him Diddy in court, but they refer to him as either the defendant or my client, Sean Combs. But people have, on both sides said, him as Diddy, you knew him as Puff Daddy, you knew him as P. Diddy. Nancy Grace calls him Cuff Daddy. I guess
Diddy is his AKA in the legal filings, Joel. It's actually
is it really?
USV Sean Combs, AKA Diddy, AKA Love, AKA Puff Daddy. So
that's why we love Julia Janae. She's bringing us the goods. So here's a question, and the answer I know to this is yes, Randy, which was there, and then we're getting into the openings and into some of the meat of the testimony today. But was P. Diddy offered a plea deal before the trial? He was offered a deal late last week, Randy, or maybe that was a week before. I'm losing track, but right before heading into trial. And he said, no way, no, thank you. And someone else's question is right here, Randy, which is, I've heard people say the feds do not bring a case that they cannot win. Is this right? So a mistake not to take a plea deal, and that could be his hubris. And does the government ever lose these cases?
The government has lost. I can say that from personal experience. It doesn't happen all that often, but winning is really a relative thing. Winning is not necessarily only an acquittal. Winning can be a hung jury. Winning can be, as I've done constantly, luck, and I wouldn't call it luck, though to me luck is the definition of opportunity meeting preparation. I've never had a client sentenced after trial in a federal case less than I would have gotten them on a plea deal. So winning really is in the eyes of the client. It is in the eyes of the defense attorney. And the simple reality is, I don't believe that there was any plea deal that was offered to Mr. Combs where instead of looking at a minimum mandatory 15 years and a maximum of life, he was looking at a deal where he could be out in 18 months or he could be out in 2 years. what you're talking about, particularly with the sentencing guidelines, since one of the oddities of federal sentencing and federal criminal practice is you don't know what your sentence is going to be when you take a plea. Conversely, in a state case, if the DA's office comes to me and says to me, Randy, your client is charged with rape 1, what we'll let you do is we'll let him take a plea to rape in the 3rd degree. The first thing I then do is I go to the judge and say, Judge, we're thinking about this. What would your sentencing promise be if my client takes this plea? So I know going in how much I have reduced my client's exposure. You don't get that benefit in a federal criminal case. In a federal criminal case, judges are prohibited from being involved in plea discussions, except in the rarest of instances. So for someone like Mr. Combs, yes, let's say they offer him enticement. So it's a minimum 10 to life. But I've been there where the government says, okay, tell you what, we'll take the 15 to life off the table. We'll offer you 10 to life. That doesn't necessarily do me any good, because it's not like the judge is going to say to me, Randy, if your client takes the plea, I'll give him 11. Instead of, if he goes to trial and blows trial, I'm giving him 25. That's 14 Christmases. That's 14 New Years. That really is the challenge of plea negotiations in a federal case being a fallacy.
By the way, Randy, this question could come back to bite me in the behind. But number one, what are you doing on my show? Number two, you're a baller. How come you're not at the Garden for the Knicks game tonight?
Well, I much rather would, when the show is over, I'm going to go upstairs, sit with my wife, and I'm going to watch the game from the comfort of my living room. As much as I love the Garden and get to go every chance I can, for me, I mean, look at me. I don't even have a suit jacket on. I'm not sitting courtside. I'm up in the nosebleed seats. I can't see a damn thing. So I just go into my living room and watch the game and enjoy it.
Randy, I'm staying with my investment banker friend from college, and I was like, "You sure you don't want to drive? They're $20,000 for 2 tickets tonight."
I work in Penn 1. Today was my first day at Penn 1, so even at lunchtime, I'm watching ESPN setting up. I'm watching everybody milling about, getting ready for the watch party that takes place in between the Garden and Penn 1. It is incredibly exciting, and I am a huge Knicks fan, so much so I find when I watch the game, I actually give them a kind of horror. I give them a jinx. I didn't watch the first 2 games they won. I watched game 3 and they got killed.
I have the same method of thinking. My mom says it's magic thinking. I say it's reality, but we'll see how it plays out. I'll get you out of here in the next 20 minutes or so, I promise, so we can watch. I'm being dragged, COE doesn't know this, to a restaurant, Wolfgang's downtown, to go watch the game at the bar.
Better have a good steak.
Yeah, we'll check it out. So other witnesses, can they still come forward? Julie, what's the deal with this? If other witnesses now, let's say someone's watching this in Fresno, California, and they had a run-in with Sean Diddy Combs, can they reach out to the feds and say, hey, I want to come in with it? Is there enough? Are they allowed to interview someone now and bring them in potentially?
I would say yes, but there's a process. On Court TV, this actually happens more often than you think. People are watching the trial, they're streaming it, and someone hears something that jogs their memory about the case, and they call into the prosecutor's office. But typically there's objections from the defense that this is a surprise witness, that it shouldn't come in, and the judge will let them perhaps come take the stand, and the judge will listen to it outside the presence of the jury, vet it, see if it's admissible, give the defense time. We've got an 8-week trial, perhaps. I don't know if in federal court it's stiffer with these deadlines and regulations on closing the discovery, but I wouldn't count it out just because I've seen it happen many times in state court.
Yeah. So, doctor, to you, this made me personally uncomfortable in court, and I'm wondering how the jurors felt about it. So Tenny Garagos, who's the defense attorney who delivered opening statements, she did a great job. She did do a good job. At one point, though, she's talking about the notoriety of P. Diddy. And she says, and my name is Tenny Garagos, and I'm honored to defend this person right after she's talking about these DV claims, this domestic violence. So I just felt like that was maybe like a little much. Like, it's okay to be deferential to your client, but maybe not to announce to the jury that you as a woman are honored and supportive of this. But then she also makes the point in opening statements, and I think this fell flat for her, and that's an understatement, when she basically just pointed the finger in so many words at Cassie Ventura and said, look, this is a money grab. She only sued after the fact when she needed the money. They took a little like jab at the family, that the family was going through a hard time. She's living with her mom in Connecticut, and suddenly it becomes an issue. What is your response as someone who studies this, knows victims in this world? You can hear, and I'm sure I'm getting the chills now. I'm sure it's going to get a lot more dramatic and emotional tomorrow when Cassie does show up. And she's this strikingly beautiful woman who's got, her world ahead of her. And then she was basically just beaten down, completely by this hip hop star. So what about this legal wrangling, this maneuver, this exploitation, pointing it toward the way of Cassie Ventura, saying she was just in it for the money. That's it.
I'm going to use the word disgusting. I mean, I didn't see it, but what you're describing to me sounds pretty bad. Maybe that's what she feels like her job is to do. But I think you could probably defend Mr. Combs without attacking Ms. Ventura in that way. This is kind of typical, unfortunately, for what a lot of victims of domestic violence and sexual violence go through, that the people turn and look at them and look to see if they have any faults, or if they might have any faults.
I'm going to jump in just because I found a quote I have my handy, by the way. I don't even know where I got this, but I have my Surviving the Survivor notebook. There's only notebooks allowed in there. The Tenny Garagos doctor said, speaking of Cassie Ventura, said that she was too afraid to go to the police, but not too afraid to go to a lawyer for help. I thought that was like a low blow. Didn't like it.
I mean, people who've been through trauma, and anybody who's watched that hotel video, that she's been through trauma. We don't know what else has happened. They take time to reach a point in their recovery where they want to do something, and often they never do. So it's really up to her whether she chooses to go to a lawyer or chooses to go to the police. That's what the law allows her to do. So I think it's a mistake for anyone to fault her. She's been through a lot. And I think that I assume the jury will understand that, will see that, and will sympathize with what she's been through.
Yeah, there was kind of a faux pas in the courtroom because it's closed, obviously. Someone was asking about the overflow room. It's literally, they just open up other courtrooms and you get to sit in the gallery, and they've got really crappy monitors in there with pretty bad audio, but it's that's the federal government, I guess, for you, the tax dollars at work. But let's dig into, this is a quote, by the way, before I say what I'm about to say, but this is from the COE, from the defense today. Sean Combs is a complicated man, is what the defense said, but this is not a complicated case. This case is about love, jealousy, infidelity, and money. They're turning it into a Harlequin romance here. There's been a tremendous amount of noise around this case. I mean, talking about language, doctor, just back to you about this. They're obviously doing everything they can to minimize the extent of the trauma directed at this victim and other victims' way, literally calling it noise. How do you react to that?
Let's remember who this was all for. All of these events were for. They were for the benefit of Mr. Combs. That when Mr. Phillip was hired, what Ms. Ventura went through and all these other people went through, it was to satisfy Mr. Combs. He appears to have been the person controlling everybody else, like marionettes. So to dismiss it as noise really feels to undercut the seriousness of it. I think calling domestic violence part of what happens, yes, that made sense. But there's a lot more going on here. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of drugs, apparently a lot of money, and a lot of violence.
Yeah, and to the first point you made, I think the language you choose is important, but I think that goes to attorneys on both sides too, and you've got to be aware of who you're speaking to at all times. The defense goes on and says, you will hear why people stayed around him and why it matters. He gave people opportunity and chances. By the way, he said he was going to give Cassie a 10-album deal, which he never got. They didn't always like what he did or how he behaved, but they truly loved him. That, according to the defense. So, Randy, we're hearing this obviously in openings from the defense. Just to sort of round out what the state and the government had to say, the feds here. They talk about how Sean Combs meets Cassie Ventura when she's just 19 years old. That she endured these years of beatings and forced sex acts. These went on from 2006 to 2018. And then he threatens to leak these humiliating sex videos, talking about also how he savagely beat her. And then one of the things you find out is he went into this fit of jealousy. By the way, the defense also said, by the way, you're going to find out that our client has a really bad temper, and it's true. So not to use the pun, but they were trying to temper the expectations of the jurors, saying, look, you're going to see a lot of this. But one of the things we find out in opening statements is that Sean Combs got so upset, in such a jealous fit, he went and tried to kill Cassie Ventura's boyfriend with a gun and just didn't get to that point and couldn't carry it out. That paints a picture of more, in my opinion, than just a jealous boyfriend, right?
What strikes me about this case is that it is really the tale of two men. And to me, it's a matter of taking the screen and splitting the screen in half and looking at two Sean Combses. On the one hand, do you have the Sean Combs who is so depraved, who is such a monster, and a monster with incredible amounts of money, that he can, in essence, create a business designed to satisfy his most craven desires, and that he ran a business that was wholly designed to satisfy the most base, horrific, disgusting fantasies that he could bring to real life. And that was his business. And that is what the government is looking to demonstrate, that when you have enough money, you have enough power. When you have enough money and enough power, you can control, you can manipulate, you can hurt, you can threaten simply for your own enjoyment. It's like having your own amusement park, which is in essence a torture chamber or a shop of horrors. On the flip side, you have the defense, which comes in and says, or at least the way I would defend the case, which is, you are not going to like Sean Combs. You're not going to like his behavior. You're not going to like his arrogance. You're not going to like his temper. You're not going to like the things that he does. But ladies and gentlemen, when you listen to the burden of proof, when you listen to the law and the judge instructs you on the law, you are going to have no choice but to determine that this is not a business. This is not an enterprise. He was not running a criminal organization. He was a guy who took advantage of people. And there were women and there were men who wanted to get into his orbit and were willing to do anything and everything to be in his orbit. And now after the fact, when they realize, well, wait a second, I can actually get something out of this now. So they flip the story, and suddenly, yeah, he goes from just, I'll do whatever he says because I want to hang out with him and I want to be in his orbit and I want to get a movie deal and I want to get a TV deal and a book deal and I want to get a record deal. And yes, there is a casting couch. But no, it's not a criminal enterprise. And when you listen to the judge, he's not on trial for being a domestic violent person, for beating up Cassie Ventura. He's not on trial for being a bad guy. You have to determine whether or not he's running a business of sex trafficking. And the answer is no, he's not.
Man, every time the defense attorneys like Randy say stuff, like I start believing what they're telling me. And I mean, that's going to be the crux of it for sure. And I'll be honest, I have no idea. I mean, I have no idea because
you're not supposed to. Right now, he is innocent. He is presumed to be innocent, and none of us have really heard any evidence yet. So no one should be in a position to make up their minds. And that is what is so great about our criminal justice system. If, in fact, you can seat 12 people who will look at you and say, hey, until I hear the evidence and the judge tells me to go deliberate, that man is innocent.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing the way, obviously that's the way the system is supposed to work. And right now, I would tell you, I don't know the answer as far as a criminal enterprise. I think I could tell you that he's abusive and it probably, definitely partakes in causing and inflicting DV. That's for sure. But I'm not sure at this point about the criminal enterprise. And I guess that's obviously why we are all here. One of the other questions, and what's interesting, Doctor, to you, one of the witnesses just kind of went missing suddenly, witness number 3. And it's this kind of weird hush over the trial. No one really knows what's going on. It wasn't really brought up today. Apparently, they can't even get in touch with the attorney from what I'm finding out. And so someone said, I'd be afraid to be a juror in this case because of the reach that a guy and sort of the mobster mentality, I guess, old school, that a guy like Sean Diddy has. What would you say to these jurors that they came to you and said, do I need to be scared? Can I, will I be punished for deliberating the wrong way here?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, and that might be more of a question for the attorneys here. But I can certainly understand why a witness or a victim would be afraid to testify. Mr. Combs does have a lot of money, does have a lot of reach, does have a lot of people working for him, does have a lot of supporters out in the community, even if they're not formally his employees. And I can understand that people would feel fear. And I agree with what one of your listeners wrote, that Ms. Ventura is a brave woman. I agree that she 100% is to come forward in this way.
Yeah. I was able, I had, when you're a reporter, sometimes you're put in weird spots, and Julia knows this, but Diddy's children came out. People, I will not ask them questions, but we do have the video. I'm going to play it here. But Julia, since you're a media person, I would love to get your take on something like this, where so these are the kids coming out. I muted it, but they start shouting questions. There's supposed to be a 600-foot sort of, I'm sorry, a 6-foot buffer. I was getting that mixed up with Karen Reed, but there's supposed to be a 6-foot buffer, which there was not. There are victims in this too, I believe. But Julia, how, in a case like this, again, it's Manhattan, the epicenter of the world, one of the biggest Hollywood celebrities, hip hop stars. How do you sort of, as someone watching this, keep it in check that these are real victims? Cassie Ventura is a real person who went through real pain, along with other people, including this guy this guy struck me as so sincere today, this escort guy who kind of got drawn into this. Without kind of getting on a soapbox, what's your advice to people who are watching this simply because it's a circus and it's riveting and it's got all the elements of, a high profile case with all these different accoutrements? What do you say to people?
You remember that they are human. That's something that is at the core of, for me, when I'm looking at any of these cases. Celebrity cases can be a lot of fanfare. That's the reason that people are out there oftentimes. I heard that there are people out there in the streets supporting him and against him. I was surprised that he has supporters out there, because you haven't really heard anyone come out publicly and support him in terms of other celebrities. But at the end of the day, especially when you see those kids, they didn't ask for this. They didn't ask to have to be in the center of this. And coming there every day is about loyalty to their father. I'm sure that the attorneys have talked to them about the importance of them being there every day, walking in through the front, not watching this remotely, but actually being there in the courtroom so the jury can see them. And Cassie, even if we recognize her music, there was an entire side to her life that none of us knew about. So I just say that people need to remember that side of it. Don't think that you can say whatever about the people involved. I think when we're behind the keyboard, especially on social media, people feel very emboldened to speak in any way about victims, about people who are accused but are innocent until proven guilty, and about the children. And I really think no matter what, I mean, trials, political races, I think children and family members should be off limits. They did not ask to be put in this situation. They have to support who's there. That's family, and most people would support their loved ones and family members. But we don't want to get desensitized to this. When I'm hearing these details about what Cassie went through, the beatings, the things she was forced to do sexually that she didn't want to do, but that she wanted to be in a relationship with him. She thought it was love, remembering that she was 19 years old. Though the jurors aren't allowed to put themselves in the shoes of the people involved, I think just to remind ourselves or to remain human when looking at it, I think sometimes it takes that to put yourself in the person's shoes and kind of sit with that.
That's really well
Julia,
said.
Ask a question?
Go ahead.
Julia, do you think the kids are props, basically? You know, you said you're sure that the attorneys talked to them about the importance of them being there. I mean, are they essentially being used as props here? Because it's got to be not just hard on kids, but, you know, potentially harmful to hear all this. I mean, I guess, well, I wouldn't wish that on any 19-year-old.
Sure. No, I agree with you 100%. I think if I were going through it, in whatever world that would be, I wouldn't want my children to have to sit and hear these things. But I think, first of all, they're going to hear it regardless. And I know in any trial, lawyers are going to tell, if someone's representing a defendant, they are going to ask the family to be there front and center. Same with victims. It's typical for victims to be inside of courtroom. If their loved one has been murdered, some want to be there, but others would rather avoid it all. But the prosecution will tell them how important it is for them to be there, so the jury can see that you have support, can see that the prosecution has support, that the loved one was humanized the victim in the case. So I wouldn't go so far as to say prop just from a legal standpoint. As an attorney, if I were representing someone, that's what I would recommend, and it wouldn't be for them to be a prop. But looking at it from the position of trauma and what it's like for them to have to be in this courtroom, I definitely wouldn't wish it on anyone.
Yeah. By the way, shout out to the COE, who's the glue that keeps us together, the chief of everything, Steve Cohen. Books amazing guests like Lisa Fontes and Randy Zellin and Julia Janae. I say it all the time. We've got the best guests in all of true crime, with all due respect to Julia Janae and Court TV. But if you find a better panel on Diddy than this, let me know, and money back is guaranteed. This, by the way, these are the lines just to get into the courthouse. I shot this early this morning. Typical New York fashion, people were arguing. A guy cut right in front of me. I told him he cut right in front of me. It was a good way to wake up today, but you can see the lines go on for a really long time. So trigger warning, because I'm about to bring up, so there's a lot of disturbing stuff, and I'm not doing this intentionally, but I think it's important because that's what this case is about. I'm going to ask the doctor about it, and it's just because I really found it. I was taking a lot of notes today, and then we'll get final thoughts from everybody, because I got to let Randy go watch this Knicks game. Go Knicks. For one, Doctor, he has this absolute fetish. It's been actually like a running joke that 1,000 bottles of baby oil were seized from Sean Diddy Combs, but I can't even count the number of times the word baby oil came up. Just to put this in perspective, he was dating Cassie Ventura, and he would get aroused, again, trigger warning, watching other men. So that's when he reached out to this witness who was up there today. And this witness said that when he first met Sean Diddy Combs, he was wearing a bandana from the eyes down, but he recognized his voice right away. He's into hip hop, and he knew Sean Combs' voice. Prior to realizing who it was, though, he said that he asked Sean Combs, what do you do? Because he didn't know who it was. Here's this wealthy guy giving him money. He said he's in the import-export business. And then this witness went on over and over to say and talk about how Sean Diddy Combs would sit there, trigger warning, and masturbate. And one of the things that he would sort of get off on is having this guy, COE is freaking out right now, have this guy finish his business inside of Cassie without protection. And you could tell he was really troubled by this, but that just took it up like a bunch of notches. And the next part I probably shouldn't bring, but this is an open court in a trial. And one of the things that Sean Diddy asked this guy to do was to urinate basically into her mouth and onto her body. And when that came up in court today, every woman and most of the men were just like, what the, it was an audible, what the, so I've got to imagine the jurors are thinking, what is wrong with this guy? And I looked at Diddy at that point, and he's just kind of, his body language is like this. He's just sitting back, just kind of like he's the mafia don watching everything. This is demented and depraved. Is there a better word for it?
Well, I think if that's what he likes, doing it with somebody who's consenting, it's a different story than what I think we're seeing. I mean, we saw the video of Ms. Ventura getting beaten to a pulp by Mr. Diddy. So I think it's safe to say that she was not consenting to these really demeaning, humiliating acts being performed on her. And they were being performed by the puppet master, controlled by the puppet master of Mr. Combs, even though he did them through other men. But they're dehumanizing, just like, having somebody on the ground and kicking them hard. That's also dehumanizing. So that Mr. Combs doesn't appear, from the testimony at least, doesn't appear to have seen these people as people. Their whole purpose was to get him off, which they did. He did. And he was creating this fantasy of torture. I like that Randy earlier used the word torture. I think that's a much more accurate word than freak off. It was a group torture sessions, and it appears that Mr. Combs was organizing them, fueling them with drugs, with money. You talked about the baby oil. I read somewhere, and I don't know if you have any more information about this, Joel, that the baby oil was infused with, was it fentanyl, with something?
I haven't gotten confirmation. I have heard that, and that's, okay, I guess, the implication. But they did bring up in open court today that, and it was this last witness of the day, the escort, who said that at least on one occasion he saw Cassie under the influence, and it was not a pretty picture that he painted. It wasn't like she was partying, having fun. He described her as being slumped over, half on the couch, half off, in a state of undress, with Sean Diddy Combs basically hovering above her, basically, for all intents and purposes, unconscious and unable to take care of herself. So
this is a horrible, Yeah, this is a really horrible thing that's going on now. I mean, not just in this trial, but the people drugging their partners and then having sex with them, or drugging strangers and then having sex with them. It's a really widespread problem on college campuses. It's there was that wonderful special, I Will Destroy You, with Michaela Cole did about her experience of that. She made it into a Netflix series, not Netflix, but she made it into a TV series. So this business of drugging people and then having sex with them, you know, I don't get it. But it's very, very disturbing. Certainly no one can consent if they're unconscious.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's not as uncommon as one might think, because we're doing another story eerily similar with guys called the Alexander brothers, who are from Miami, and more than 60 women have come forward, and now a minor is involved. They've just been, I think there was a superseding indictment. So it goes from bad to worse. Same thing with Diddy. There are reportedly some minor victims as well. So let's get some final thoughts. Huge thanks, as always, to Julia Janae. She's a anchor and reporter for Court TV. She's also an accomplished attorney in her own right, a sweet human being that should not be subjected to listening to this crazy stuff that goes on in this crazy world. Julia, I guess my question to you is, what are you looking for next in this trial that's supposed, by the way, we're going to be here all this week. I don't know how much longer I can handle either this testimony or pesky New Yorkers in my mug at 7:30 fighting over lines with me, but we will definitely continue to cover it if I'm not here in Lower Manhattan. But what are you looking for as this case twists and turns? And I'll get this Gloria Sott in a minute.
Well, I'm so glad you're out there, Joel, and be on the lookout for Kelly Craft, our legal correspondent who's out there, our senior producer, Emanuela Grinberg. They're out there. So if you see them, say hello. They might be ripping and running so that they can get stuff for us on our air. And I also have to plug that, you know, at Court TV, even though we're covering the Karen Reed trial, Vinnie Politan is there live all this week. That's the televised trial, and we will be giving updates on Diddy throughout the day. What I'm looking forward to, other than the obvious one, which is Cassie, just hearing from her for the first time, hearing from the reporters that are inside this courtroom about how she appears, how she holds up under this testimony, how she's cross-examined, how tough are they going to be on such a sympathetic witness. But also, I want to see if Kid Cudi is going to be taking the stand. He's the one who had long been rumored to have been targeted by Diddy after he had this romantic interaction with Cassie, and then his car blows up and is torched. So compelling testimony like that, I think, is really just going to paint that picture that the prosecution needs of this coercive control over anyone and everyone that was in his orbit.
Yeah, the defense should have been like, we'll tell you now that he's got a bad temper. It's so bad that he might actually blow your car up. But they left that part of it out. Here's Gloria Allred, who, again, I had the pleasure of hanging out with today. She got absolutely mobbed. She's a victims' rights attorney. Let's just listen to this quick, and then we'll get Dr. Fontes and Randy's final take, and we will bid adieu. Here's Gloria Allred.
Of course, going to argue defense. They've argued, well, some of these victims, all of these alleged victims, are going to testify engaged in civil lawsuits. So they have a motive, bias to gain money. That's, I think, not an argument that juries should buy in any case. And they have a right to, but first of all, every person who is a victim has a right to file a civil lawsuit to seek compensation. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? And if they didn't file a civil lawsuit, well, and they just testified in this court of law, then the defense would probably try to find a different argument as to, this is about showing bias. They have a right to try to show bias. But again, we'll have to see what the evidence is.
Quick question.
He's entitled to presumption of innocence unless and until he's proven guilty in a court of law. Beyond a reasonable doubt. We don't know at this point what the defense is going to have. It looked to me that Mr. Combs had over 10 defense lawyers in the courtroom.
It was like a party.
Small army of defense lawyers.
All right, that's enough of that. But Gloria's amazing. I mean, she's at least my mother's age, if not older, and she's out there and she's active and kudos to her for having that kind of passion and helping victims all these years. Lisa Aronson Fontes, PhD to all of you, otherwise known as Doctor. She serves as an expert witness in legal cases related to intimate partner abuse, coercive control, trauma, child abuse. The list goes on. You said you wrote the second book, I believe, ever. What is the title of that book? Where do people find it?
It's called Invisible Chains: Overcoming Coercive Control in Your Intimate Relationship. And it's available, and wherever you buy books. You can order it online, certainly.
By the way, this is Get That, Invisible Chains. That's a great title, I was going to say. But thank you, Maya. I met her this morning, and her mother. They helped do some line standing for us, which sounds silly, but it is invaluable. And thank you so much. We're doing the work of a network with very few people. So I appreciate it very much. Dr. Fontes, to you, we have a lot of survivors in our community, and this is really heavy and difficult stuff. And I think it's going to get worse tomorrow when we're expecting Cassie Ventura. It's going to get more emotional, heavy, powerful, depressing, all those things. So what's your advice to people who may be victims themselves, who are tuning in because they're interested? They want to see the outcome. They want to see if justice is served, but it might be a little too close to them. What would you say?
Well, I would say that they should not feel obligated to follow every single second, that they might need to take a break from time to time. They might want to pay attention with a friend or with a family member. If they've had a therapist in the past or an advocate, they might want to get back in touch with that person. I teach a course on sexual violence, both at Smith College and at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And it's the community of the course that is so empowering for people. So it may actually be empowering in some ways to watch this trial and to tune into your show, Joel, because people can see that these issues are being taken seriously. Allegedly, Mr. Combs engaged in these crimes for decades, as did Harvey Weinstein, as did R. Kelly. So there is a certain amount of empowerment in hearing that they are coming to light, they are being taken seriously. And I hope that will give certain people a boost because they're hard issues. But you can reach out to your local domestic violence agency. You can reach out to your local rape crisis center. Even if something happened to you a long time ago, they will listen to you. They may have a group that would be helpful to you.
That's amazing advice. And Abundantly Empowered says, sending healing to all victims and survivors. Allie B with great advice. If it triggers you, step away. Randy Zellen's going to step away to the Knicks game in a moment. He is listen, we have a lot of amazing criminal defense attorneys, but I would put Randy in my top 2 or 3 if I ever get in trouble. I'm calling that guy. And smart and savvy and a nice guy. Randy, how does this trial end? Or are we under the presumption of innocence and you're not able to answer that yet?
Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment. But 2 things really stand out for me in terms of how this trial ends. Number 1, the use of the video. Is that video really out there kind of as an overhang to remind the jury that if, and this is the definition of reasonable doubt, anytime you need more information in making an important decision in your life, if you need a second opinion, whether or not to have surgery, if you need more time to think about, am I ready to ask someone to marry me, then you have a reasonable doubt. Conversely, if you don't need any more information and you can make that decision, you can schedule the surgery, you can bring out that engagement ring, then you don't have a reasonable doubt. So to me, that video is really out there from the government's perspective to remind those jurors, if you're really not sure if consent was involved, if you're really not sure whether or not these people were just hanging on, wanting to be part of the orbit now, they've got sour grapes, or now they're jumping on a different bandwagon. That video is a reminder that this was not consensual. That's number one. And number two, to the doctor's point, because right down the block is Harvey Weinstein.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a different standard of justice based upon the color of your skin? We've already seen Harvey Weinstein get convicted once. Does the defense in the Sean Combs case play the card of the government is just going after a wealthy, powerful man of color? And that's what this case is all about. And can it be that Harvey Weinstein, the white man, can be convicted so easily, maybe even too easily? And is there a different standard for Sean Combs because this is an attack on a wealthy, powerful man who the government just wants to bring down because of the color of his skin?
It is, as Martin Luther King said, it's the content of your character, not the color of your skin, right? And that's how it should be with the law. If Diddy was up to no good, he needs to pay the consequences. And by all accounts, at least right now, doesn't seem to be the greatest person of the year. So we're gonna find out a lot more as this trial develops. Just a quick reminder, I will be here through this week, and then we'll continue to cover this case. It's a long one, 8 weeks long. And then this is the beginning of trial coverage. We're going to be covering Donna Adelson, Brian Koberger. We have Stefan Stearns. We've got Brooks Houck, all these different trials coming up that I'm going to try to get to. So it's going to be a busy summer. Let's go Knicks. Although, Randy, I'm getting word in the chat that the Knicks are losing. So maybe you and I should not watch. Maybe we are bringing bad luck. Yeah. Love you, America. Love you to Julia in Georgia. Lisa, where are you located? What state?
Massachusetts.
Love you, Massachusetts. Stay away from those crazy Karen Reed people and that whole trial. COE is now saying, why would you say that? And Randy in New York. Love you, New York. And justice for Cassie Ventura and other victims who are dealing with this. Let's see how this plays out. We will see you tomorrow live from New York City. Take care, everybody.